This is Back Roads of Illinois server to farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and the Midwest. Today's edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were bringing you lasted for farming sources and information sponsored by AgriGold. We're glad you're here on today for a Thursday. I'm Cesar Delgado on today. We're going to be in Oglesby at Illinois Community College for Field Day in Oglesby, Illinois. I'm talking to Joy Jones for Nitrogen Rate of the University of Illinois Extension and Willard Mutt from Illinois Community College and Trent Porter from Northern Partners in Ottawa. We're here for tomorrow at Illinois Community College. Other stories on the new surworm outbreak in Maryland. This person traveled with a new surworm from El Salvador for last week. We will hear from NBCA with Conlin Woodall about it. I will be with John Heinberg from Total Farm Marketing. We will have a conversation about this commodities markets, especially in uncertainty within the grains markets with John. You've been listening to Back Roads of Illinois.
From what we understand, it was an individual who had made a trip to one of the countries in Central America that has New World screwworm, which is all of the countries in Central America right now. Came back, had some pain, went to seek treatment, and discovered that they were infested with New World screwworm larvae. I think the key is that the CDC protocols work. They identified it. CDC is not a PR agency. I can't speak as to why they make the decisions of what they announce or don't announce, but we do know that protocol worked, and that individual was treated and the larvae were destroyed. And while, yes, it's surprising to see that particular story, it's not shocking.
There is a first human case of the New World screwworm in Maryland. This person traveled back from El Salvador for vacation from over there. Conlin Woodall from National Beef Cattle Association. He says that we need to be keeping an eye on this first human case in Maryland.
There was a human case in the United States last year, 2024. There was one in 2023. We also know of one that happened in 2014, and all of them were very similar. These were individuals who traveled to a country that had New World screwworms, brought the larva back with them, and then when the pain got unbearable, went to seek treatment, and the CDC was engaged. It was identified, and those larvae were destroyed. So we as NCBA, we're not shocked to see that there is a human case.
There was first case of the New World screwworm in 2023 and 2024. We also know about it with the disease back in 2014, but it was not severe cases in 2014 than now. CDC seek a new way to combat the disease.
I think for us, as we are taking a serious approach to protecting ourselves from New World screwworm, the things that we're looking at is one, did the protocols work? And it's obvious that the protocols work. And let's think about this for a minute from a human standpoint. If you go travel and somehow the New World screwworm female lays its egg somewhere in your body, you come back to the United States, you're going to have excruciating pain because these larvae, these maggots are going to be eating you alive. So you're going to go seek some sort of treatment.
Woodall said that you were traveling with New World screwworm is you're seeking a treatment of this disease is occurring in particular place with the female lay down her eggs on the larva.
This is not a situation where it's a tick bite or a mosquito bite. You might scratch it and not necessarily think twice about seeking treatment until further down the line. This is not a situation where those larvae are going to then exit the human pupate and become the fly because that pain is just so excruciating. So CDC's approach, CDC's protocols, and the information that they have out there in the medical community obviously work. So that is probably the biggest takeaway we need to understand.
Thanks to Ray Hayes from Radio Oklahoma Network in Oklahoma City by this audio. The crop is maturing and demand is lower than previous years. And we were getting ready for the harvest season in a few weeks. Otherwise, we were joining with John Heinberg from Total Farm Marketing. John, how are you?
I'm doing well, getting ready for a new football season here, starting this weekend.
Let's start with our conversation about the crop progress from the Department of Agriculture for this week in the Midwest. What is your thoughts on the volatility for the corn markets because it is going to be the harvest season? We know it.
Yeah, I mean, let's take a look at crop progress and where things are right now. I mean, obviously, ratings are at the stage they should start slipping this time of year, but they're holding in there pretty well when you still look at the historical level. Again, still only 2016 was rated better than this crop was. But again, ratings are very subjective. Let's go look at some of the maturity factors in there. We are seeing the amount of corn getting to maturity is moving along right now, at least at an average to the 5-year pace, maybe just a touch ahead of that. But there's some things out there that are a bit concerned to producers as we talk about this corn crop. Some of the things such as some of the disease pressure that we're seeing. We got southern rust as well as, excuse me, as affecting some of these acres, as well as the dry conditions in the eastern corn belt, just probably taking some top off this yield, at least at this point. So that'll be something we'll see how it comes out down the road. Now, USDA will put their next set of yield estimates out there on Friday's report. Don't expect a big cut or anything in that regard. Maybe they will because of the dry conditions. Typically, they don't. Drops on the yield going into the end of the year. So anything can kind of be a play here when we get to the USDA numbers. The thing is, how does the market handle those conditions? We'll see right now. Even if the yield number is not where the market thinks it is, they're going to trade what they feel it's going to be, and that's probably going to be a yield in the lower 180s, maybe close to that 182, 83 level, or maybe even lower if the weather continues to stay unfriendly in terms of finishing out this crop.
Great to hear that. I can't wait till Monday night at the Vikings. But do you have any thoughts on the corn markets for this week, John?
Well, we saw a really nice turn off first notice day for that September contract. That was last week. Saw the hard selling pressure into the 26th, 27th, and then we turned out quickly. That's kind of a historical move. We did that last year too. In fact, last year we put about a 50-cent rally in from that low, which wound up being the contract low for on first notice day. This year it was just kind of a retest of the lower end of support. And we've seen a nice rally. Now we hit a 420 area here this week. Got a little bit of a pullback yesterday. Really like the performance of the corn market today, getting back up above that, around that 420 area. In fact, we did trade there on the last trades today before settling back to 419 and a quarter. So there's at least maybe some momentum there. I still think we got a little bit of push because of that strong demand tone that we see in the corn market. And we push this up. Let's get into that 430 window. We have a gap on the chart from 432 that everybody keeps talking about. And then we'll see if we get some good money flow, if weather continues to stay a little bit tough, demand stays good, this thing could go up and challenge the 440 area, which would be back to the high from July 3rd.
How about a technical on the beans really quick?
Soybean market, a little different story there in that regard, but today was a decent price action. It looked like bean prices were going to be in a real tough spot the way the day started. Kind of got down to that November area of 10.25, found some footing, and then again followed maybe the corn market back to the upside here at the end of the day. Now, there's a few things that are working in that soybean market to help support price right now. Again, it's a balance between where the crop is and that lack of Chinese demand.
Sure. I went to Indicator for the Farm Progress show. We heard about the grains markets as not doing great for this season with farmers. But I want you to think about the technical aspects for corn. How concerned about it with the technical aspects on the corn?
Well, it's a combination of things when it comes to a market price. And yeah, your statement there about where market prices are. It's a very difficult go out there for most, if not all, producers. A lot of guys haven't got a lot of bushels sold for both corn and soybeans here, just kind of looking for some opportunity and get a little meat on the bone. And market just isn't providing that, which again makes cash flow, things like that, very, very tight. I'm very aware of that, talking with my producers of what the situation is out there right now, and there's a lot of tension because of that in terms of what's going to happen going forward. But technically looking at that core market, like I kind of said it earlier, this move back through 420, get some follow through off it today, tomorrow would be really be nice going into the weekend. We still got a biggest thing we still watch here in the core market, maybe more just money flow, corn flow, what's happening in this window. The funds right now have been moving out of their short position and been buying a little bit into the corn market. They're still net short or fairly neutral right now, at least according to our estimates. So that's something we saw last year in this exact same window as they kind of turned this thing around and started buying the market, even despite the large supply that's still coming at us now. The market's trying to balance again a really strong demand tone. We've sold more corn this year to start the next marketing year than we've done in over a decade of sales in almost 25 years. If we get a good sale number tomorrow, we may even be the best set of sales in 25 years. We're real close to taking that record level out. But then on the same time, too, what's happening with this crop? What's happening with the yield? We could have a picture. We have good demand with a tightening supply, and that just will help bring some money flow as this market tries to push through some different technical barriers to the upside, and we see more short covering by the funds.
Yeah, it's tough out there. What is your thoughts on the funds on this week, John, with the demand?
Was that on you said on wheat or this week? My apologies.
Yeah, it's tough out there. What is your thoughts on the funds on this week, John, with the demand?
The funds have been basically got a reason to maybe step out of some shorts here, and it's a combination of that strong demand and then the fundamentals that we're seeing. Maybe this market get a little tighter in supply. I don't think they're going to go buying into it hand over fist. There's no story right now that really is a major concern. We're still going to have a good supply of corn out there. We do have good demand to kind of work through that pile, but unless something were to trigger some aggressive buying, I think this market is still going to be very limited because as prices kind of climb, U.S. producers are pulling more triggers, South American producers are selling more corn, and that's just going to be a natural limit into the market, especially in these first handful of weeks of harvest. As if we do have a big crop, those bushels need to go find a home, and I think you're going to see it hit the marketplace. So that could be a bit of a limiting factor. In fact, if you look at last year's December corn futures, what happened this window, we rallied from our 385 low, we pushed it all the way nicely up into the 440, 450 handle, and then we basically gave most of that back in the month of October as harvest started kicking in, and it just bogged down the system. I'm kind of fearful that very same pattern could have formed again this year. Because there's going to be a lot of corn moving here on top of that old crop corn that just got pushed out here over the last handful of weeks.
Of course, John. We will see for this harvest season coming out in markets is doing well otherwise. The ranchers is happy about the cattle markets. What would you want to talk to the ranchers and the cattle markets for flour plan on it?
Yeah, cattle market continues to be strong, but just like you've seen here, all of a sudden, boom, couple the volatility stays very, very high. Now we got the futures market versus cash market. Those are two different entities. Sometimes cash continues to stay strong, 245, 242 based on the regions last week. I expect that number to stay fairly firm again this week, given the retail prices still trading around that 416 area today on choice carcasses. But when it comes to what the producers need to stay in front of, we're a headline away from this market really blowing up in terms of losing some value. Probably the story that's going to break it will be if we open up that Mexican border, allow those feeder cattle in, but it could be anything else, something on the economic scale or something on demand side for U.S. beef that comes into play. My only fear is if that market does break, technically, you saw a little bit of it today. We crossed through a barrier and boom, a real quick buck down. If people want to get really out of this cattle market in a hurry, the door is not going to be big enough, and that could really put some impact on prices. So producers, just keep those puts in play, keep the flooring mechanisms underneath this market. If you got profitability, make sure you lock it in somehow and just let the upside continue to work with your cattle. If this market wants to still go that way, I'm still fundamentally favoring the market here. October typically rallies into its expiration here. We usually see some pullback like this in 1st of September. So maybe this is just an opportunity for the market to want to get bought again, especially if the cash trade remains high.
What is the technical aspects on October feeder today, John?
You go look at that feeder cattle market, very similar to live cattle market. We got some price rollover here today, down $2.50 on that October contract. So with that, we did put a very nice high in here about 5 days ago. We poked at 370, failed to get through there. We did kind of try to re-challenge that on Tuesday this week and didn't quite make it and actually finished the day softer. That probably triggered some technical selling here as we got a kind of a soft top on the bottom of this mark, on the top of this market, a little bit of momentum loss. So we'll have to see if that continues to be the driver here. As prices look like they got a little more room to correct before we find some really good levels of support. Maybe the October contract 354 area on the feeders. So with that, again, the cash market still remains firm. The cash index is still trading 360, 361. So it's above the board. So those are things that make that October contract maybe look cheap as long as that cash market and the index continue to stay strong.
Of course, John. What is your final thoughts about the weather is coming up for next couple weeks?
I mentioned it earlier. I think the moisture level is going to be a big key. Do we get a little return to warmer temperatures too? If we do, that could really kickstart this crop to the finish line. And then we get that harvest rolling, and then this market's going to have to deal with these bushels that's going to come at us. Already seeing some indications in the cash market that it's concerned about the supplies coming at the market here for both corn and soybeans going forward. So, at least looks like right now weather conditions are going to be pretty friendly to get this crop finished out, maybe even get it finished out a little sooner than the market wants. And that will get maybe a bit of an early harvest, especially given some of that early planted bushels for both corn and soybeans that are out there.
Where people can find you for your consulting services for their grain marketing?
Sure. Feel free to give me a call, 800-334-9779. Shoot me an email at jonh@totalfarmmarketing.com. Don't forget the website, totalfarmmarketing.com.
Thanks for joining us for today, John. Let's go the Bears for this weekend.
Yeah, we gotta go for those. Gotta root for my Packers this week, especially against the Lions. Going to be a tough game.
Of course, I'm tonight in Philadelphia.
gonna be just good to see some football, regular season football back on the screen. I'll plan on being slightly observant of that game. So we'll see how it turns out, but Eagles are going to be tough. So with that, thank you again, Caesar. Appreciate being here this week.
Agreed. John Heinberg from Total Farm Marketing on back roads of Illinois.